Good evening, everyone. It's 5 p.m. Welcome everyone to the council meeting for Monday, February 10th. Call the meeting to order. I appreciate all the work going into studying this agenda. It's fairly ambitious. There's a large volume of documentation to go over. Does anybody have anything they'd like us to consider for additional items? Councillor Hibbs, so you're reaching for your mic there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Thank you. All those in favor? Manager Will, would you care to come up and join us? We'll move into our request for decision, item 5.1, hours of work policy. Whenever you're ready to go there, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. You would have seen this policy in 2018 as a result of the changes to the Employment Standards Code. We've had some additional changes that have triggered a change to this policy. So we've taken the opportunity to add some more definitions and to provide some clarity around after-hours work and building checks. And the most significant change is the removal of the flexible averaging agreement, which is no longer required under the code. Other than that, the policy remains as it was in 2018 when you approved it. And that's all I have.
That was certainly concise.
Well, long agenda.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll just move the council approve the hours of work policy effective February 10th, 2020. Am I supposed to make, is it two separate ones or all one?
That's certainly fine for the additional one. Thank you. So just so there's no misunderstandings with those watching us at home, this does bring us up with current work standards.
It most certainly does.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I was really curious about the 37.5 hours per week. Where does that half hour come from? Because I'm guessing it's 5 days times 7.
We work 7.5-hour days. So our inside workers or administrative people work 7.5 hours a day.
Okay. Times 5. Oh, gotcha.
That does not bode well.
And public works and outside workers work 8 hours a day for the 40 hours a week.
If it were budget time, those numbers would be rolling off the
And she sent me out with this budget time.
Anything additional before we consider the motion on the floor? All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. And additionally, Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would move the second motion there that council rescind the existing hours of work policy 14125.02, or sorry, 02, 2018, effective February 10th, 2020.
Thank you. Anything further? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Appreciate it, Andrew.
Have a good evening.
Director Piche, we've got Bylaw 365.1, the records retention bylaw up for first reading. Would you care to walk us through that, please?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Before council tonight is Bylaw 365.1, an amendment to Bylaw 365, the records retention, disposal, and release of municipal documents bylaw. This bylaw has not been updated since it was adopted in 2010. However, there are some proposed changes that will better reflect the way our records are kept with legislation, changes with technology, and to allow for a more streamlined process to update the retention schedule. Some of the changes that are proposed is an updated definitions list, providing authority to the CAO to establish and maintain the retention schedule and provide direction on destruction or extending retention of records, and changing the fee structure or the fee schedule to requesting information to be in accordance with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Currently, our rates are much higher than the FOIP Act, yet if someone does come in to request information, they can go through a formal FOIP request, which is much more thorough and takes much more time than gathering just the information that's requested, thus resulting in a much lower fee coming to the city for that. The amendment does take Schedule A out of the bylaw and places it within an internal administrative directive, assigning the authority to the CAO to set the limitations on how long records are kept. If there are any questions, I can answer them at this time. Otherwise, administration is requesting first reading of Bylaw 365.1.
Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. It's not super important, but you have, of course, you've gotten rid of the old fee schedule, and it talks about the new fee schedule equal to or less than the fees provided for FOIP. What are those fees? They aren't referenced here.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Let me just find Bylaw 365. So for photocopying and initial first costs, it's $3.50 as per our old schedule. Any subsequent pages are at 25 cents a copy. So those prices are quite high in today's standards. Photocopies of inactive files are at $13.25, or 50 cents per copy as subsequent pages. Just to review files, it's $13. And it goes on with that as very high rates. According to the FOIP Act, the rates just start at 25 cents as a maximum, but the FOIP Act, the way they do it is that it has to be what the true cost is to the municipality. So when we do a FOIP request, if we have more than $150 worth of time and charges and such, that is when we end up being able to charge somebody for access to information. If it's under the 150, they basically get it for free, and that's as per the FOIP request. So we would end up having people come back and ask us through a formal FOIP request quite often, just because they try to avoid those costs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Pichet. And those current charges are outlined on page 20 of our package, I believe.
I don't believe they're in there, are they?
Yeah,
Are they there? Okay.
The old fees, I just wondering what
Correct.
the new fees were. I didn't see the new fees.
The new fees are just referencing to the FOIP Act is what it is. So any changes to the FOIP Act, then we will follow that structure.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So I'm assuming the numbering will change? Because under schedules, it says number 12 is deleted, so then 13, 14, 15 would be renumbered? Or?
In the consolidated, those would still be there to show that they were deleted from the original bylaw.
Okay, so Schedule B would stay as Schedule B as well? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Connick.
I also move that council approve first reading of Bylaw 365.1.
Thank you. Don't see any additional comments to be made, so I'll call a question, and all those in favor? And opposed? Thanks, Director Pichet. Next up, Director Thompson, did you care to take us through Bylaw 400.24, the updates?
I certainly can. Thanks, Mayor Creasy.
So this item is a continuation of a presentation from administration regarding changes to the land use bylaw under bylaw 400.24. At Council's January 13th meeting, we went over a number of the proposed changes regarding the residential and downtown area redevelopment sections of the bylaw, and heard feedback from council regarding those. And so we've captured those comments, and we'll be incorporating proposed revisions based on council's feedback on second reading. And so tonight we'd like to focus on the next aspect of this bylaw amendment, and that's commercial and industrial development amendments. And again, we'll capture council's feedback tonight and then incorporate any proposed changes into second reading at the next council meeting. So the commercial industrial developments are certainly, the proposed amendments to the commercial industrial development section is a lot smaller, a lot lighter than the residential area. And so I'll just go over them now. So the first item is and I'm on page 8 of the report, and that's page 28 of the PDF. To provide downtown business owners flexibility in choosing the placement of an all-able A-Ford sign. So presently in the bylaw, there are some prescriptive setbacks. It's 1 meter back from the curb for A-frame signs that are placed on the sidewalk. And that it works in some cases it doesn't work because of the placement of streetlight poles, because of the placement of where parking is located. And so instead of being prescriptive on that, we're proposing to just require that a safe pedestrian walkway be maintained, and that passage of pedestrians is unrestricted through the placement of that A-frame sign. So that gives bylaw officers and that gives business owners to use good sense and discretion on the placement of an A-frame sign, and be less prescriptive on 1 meter setback limitation for that A-frame sign. And so last time we went through a process where I was looking for council's feedback through the form of a thumbs up, thumbs down, or sideways thumb in terms of whether this amendment would be accepted or whether further information would be required of administration. And so if I could, at least through the mayor, request council do the same for each of these amendments here, so we have a clear indication of where council wants administration to go with the second reading.
Certainly, we just did that now. And so this is for the proposals that's referring to section 7.91B. Start with that one?
Correct, the A-frame sign.
Okay. So on the first item then, we've got some additional comments. Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. My only, I guess this isn't really, well, it's semi-related, just, I haven't got a problem with this, I've just got a problem with, I guess this is a bylaw issue, with the A-frames that appear all over town that are not in front of a business, but that's an aside issue, I guess.
So if we could have an indication, if the first item for some flexibility with choosing locations for the A-frame type signs, indicate now. I would suggest that is going to go.
Thank you, Councillor.
And then the next one up, considering adding the education facility as a discretionary use in the C3 transitional commercial district and the UC, which is University Commercial District. There again, to provide a little more flexibility. Anybody have any comments or concerns they would like to go through prior to your indication? So, pertaining to that item only, what's your thoughts on it, yes or no? I think that was fine too. Director Thompson. And then the final one, which is a little longer, basically proposal there to provide development officers with the authority to make decisions on variances up to 15% and to enable them to serve as the development authority for discretionary use applications which did not receive concerns or objections from the public. So there's a pretty strong methodology there for if in fact there are members of the public that do have issues with the discretionary use item, and they put forward their concerns in writing only, I'm assuming, or complaint in general? In writing?
It'd be in writing.
Okay.
Discretionary applications would still be circulated and for comment, and based on feedback during that comment period, the development authority would have the discretion to take the MPC if there was no comments from the public. It certainly does not prescribe them, so they can still decide to take an issue or a development to MPC if the development officer felt that it was needed guidance or a decision to be made by MPC. But certainly this allows them also the option in more routine applications to make the decision in-house about it.
Right, and I certainly like the distinction that if in fact someone does have issues with it, the way it reads here, it says that applications which did not receive concerns or objections. So a current concern could still be positive for it. Would that still count, or only if they are detrimental to the application itself? Would they be taken forward to?
I see. So the intent would be if there are objections to the application in this case.
Okay, very good. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess I just have one question. Of course, when discretionary items come to MPC, we have the ability to, approve them or not allow them. They can also come with a recommendation from administration as to approval or disapproval. It doesn't happen often, but it could be that it's recommended that we not allow it, and then MPC, for whatever reason, decides to allow it. So the long-winded question here is, what happens if somebody brings something forward to, we have now given it to the planning department to say yay or nay, and they say no? Does that mean that it goes then to MPC, or conversely, does that mean that they have an appeal period that they're able to go up to the next level? So you kind of skip MPC and then go right to, I forget what the name of the other one is, but which, is that even allowed? So I guess I just want some clarification there.
Yeah, certainly if there's still subject to, the development officer's decisions are still subject to appeal in an appeal period. So if the development officer were to make a decision not to take the matter to MPC, that decision in itself is subject to appeal to the SU.
Appreciate that clarification. Chief Gowdy, go ahead.
I would also just say, as a matter of course, if we could not reach agreement with an applicant and said, we're really just not going to be able to approve this, we would not issue that administratively. We would say, we're not comfortable issuing this administratively, and so you're going to have to go through MPC, and just so you know, our recommendation will be refusal. And so we wouldn't get to a spot where we're refusing it in-house and then having to appeal our own decision. But they could.
I think by giving this authority to the development officer who's acting as the development authority, it'll help lessen the load of those items of less consequence that come before MPC, of which over the past couple of years there have been, I would think, areas where there's been several, and it seems like an unfortunate waste of time for the applicant and for the board and for our staff when this could be dealt with on those minor items. So I'm certainly especially in favor of this item myself. Anyone else, are you ready to give an indication on this item? We can indicate now. Yes, no, maybe so. This one's a positive as well. I think that was the three items that you were wanting addressed. Council, so you can continue on if you'd like.
Certainly, yeah. So thank you, Council, for that feedback. The last item I just wanted to bring to Council's attention, if you haven't seen it already, is there was a public open house or public engagement process that took place in the summer regarding changes in this bylaw. The summary of that public feedback is included in the package, and so if there is any questions about the feedback they received or that public engagement strategy or anything that the Council would like to see from a public engagement point of view, in terms of feedback back to administration, certainly we can take that. But primarily, if any of Council's feedback affects any of the proposed amendments included in the bylaw, then that's certainly we would prefer to hear them tonight if there's anything else. because we do plan on compiling a second reading for the next council meeting for second reading, and we'll propose third reading as well.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I completely respect this process is to make it more user-friendly for our developers and our planning and development staff and so forth. I guess one area of concern is not only as a council but as a citizen is Lacombe historically has a historic theme within our community that I feel maybe somewhat responsible to maintain, that in our high traffic areas that has created a lot of attention, as maintaining that historic even in new buildings. And without a doubt, we have some community advocates that have a lot of heart and pride in maintaining that without any direction. I guess I'm just kind of asking for some discussion from council or Director Thompson is, although as we want to completely encourage and have great relationship with our developers, and that's the point of going through this process, is where do you draw the line as to try to encourage, have architectural controls moving forward to maintain that historic theme of our community that, there's been some, like I say, there's been some people that have taken upon themselves to voluntarily advocate for that continued theme, but some that may have a less desire. How do we have a balance and some consistency? Could we address that, but yet find some reasonable, without deterring development or making any of the development relationship approach in Lacombe to do business in a negative way? I just feel like somehow we need to maintain that. As any thoughts or comments, I guess?
So before you do answer that, is there a specific area of the city that you would like us to address to?
Highway 2A and Highway 12, like major traffic areas.
On the highway,
Right.
commercial areas?
For example, I think there's some zoning of some areas that could be updated to represent an architectural appeal. Maybe CO Gowdy could elaborate. I briefly talked to him. If I haven't confused you.
Gowdy?
Sure, so Councillor Ross and I did discuss this earlier today. I think the area of specific concern is in the transition between Lacombe's downtown zone, so the C1 zoning in our real downtown core, and where it transitions into highway commercial. And so if you look sort of that area, someone who's done a great job would be the Sunny 94 building, who's continued kind of the C1 downtown historic feel or a certain quality of aesthetic into that highway commercial zoning. And so that, I think, is what Councillor Ross that we had talked about, was to say, well, is there the ability, if you're looking at some of that highway commercial zoning, to have a historic, or not a historic, an architectural overlay, so that there's more design control within that area.
Director Thompson, was there anything additional that you wanted to go through?
Perhaps to supplement the CAO's comments on the design control in a certain area. So that can be done through the land use bylaw in zoning. Like there can be some architectural controls within certain zonings. In this case, the transitional zoning is a C3 zoning, so we could look at some different architectural controls that affect C3 zoning or that transitional zoning. The intent of that C3 zoning, as the CAO has highlighted, it's a transition between industrial and commercial uses along a certain area. So we would probably want to strike that balance. Typically, when we receive those applications for those areas, we err on the side of accommodating a builder or developer in that zone. And so there are also other, aside from the zoning itself, there's also other provisions in the land use bylaw which speak to the exterior masses, like what kind of building materials can be used. And so certainly there are areas in the land use bylaw that can be amended to affect that zoning. There's always a trade-off between, as you've highlighted, between regulation and flexibility from a developer point of view. And so I guess we would take council's direction on whether they want to foresee or they want the administration to explore that either in this amendment or if council would like to see a further amendment to propose that addresses this matter.
Chief Cuddy?
That's good, yes, thanks. So I think specifically the area of concern here is that which is highlighted as the pedestrian-oriented downtown gateway district, so the light blue on the bottom left there, where there would be some sort of an overlay. A concern that I had mentioned to Councillor Ross when we talked about this is that it is a balance in terms of the standards that you're expecting and the costs to developers to achieve those standards. And so particularly in that zone, I think you have a lot of existing properties that would be, that likely would not meet any sort of architectural overlay that was imposed. And so imposing it on new development may be challenging administratively, because I think most developers would look and say, well, you're asking me to meet a standard that perhaps one other building in the zone meets, and none of the other ones do, so how come I'm the first one to have to do this? And so I think you would get some pushback. That's not to say it's not a good thing to do. We want to have high quality development in Macomb as well, but I think you would potentially face that pushback of nobody else is doing that in the zone, how come I'm the first one to have to meet the standard?
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would speak in favor of maybe having this as a separate conversation and not trying to dovetail this in with our current conversation. I'd like to see these changes move forward and get implemented, and then I think this is a longer conversation. I'm just looking at the City of Macomb Downtown Area Redevelopment and Urban Design Plan from 2013, and of course that's where that little graphic came from. I believe it's where it came from for the different districts. And then it does talk about in here about maintaining the historic character of the, the historic character of the historic residential district, which is of course just one small portion of that. And so that there, in this document, is, from what I could read, no expectation that that's going to be mimicked in all of those areas. So I think if we're going to change that, that's a much bigger conversation. That would be maybe a community-wide conversation. So I would definitely speak in favor of not really proceeding with that at this point in time, but maybe sort of honing in on that specifically at a later date.
Thank you, and I think that the vast majority of those areas that are around that particular one do have some sort of architectural overlays. I know there's an awful lot of them throughout the city. That one currently does not, so certainly something that we could look at in the future. Councillor Ross, by all means.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. It was just I guess I'll just encourage for open for discussion as this thing. Decisions made today are going to affect years down the road, and I guess it's just kind of trying to protect I guess the history, I guess, so to speak. My apologies, if I may ask another question. Pursued down into Bylaw 400, some of the changes was the renovations of a 30-day permit to have a trailer. I don't know if that's, do we review, how far are we going into this? Is this information? My apologies if I'm misunderstanding. As a contractor, you can apply for a permit for the for 30 days to have like a disposal unit or whatever. I was just going to suggest, should that be longer in the defense of a contractor to do renovations? Isn't that a narrow time frame? Like if it was 60 or 90 days instead of 30? And I apologize if this isn't a part of the discussion of the Bylaw 400.
Chief County, go ahead.
So it is, I think that maybe what you are specifically referring to though is that we have added or proposed to add in this, the ability to have a CCAN, right? For demolitions and different construction projects. It has been 30 days, but I think that there's the ability for those contractor disposal type units, that has been in place for some time. This is more about the CCAN specifically, is that right, Director Thompson? And 30 days is the limitation there?
Yeah, it speaks to a construction site, trailer, building, or CCAN. So certainly CCAN is amongst those things. And so we've suggested a 30-day period, primarily because just trying to keep them temporary, because they are an aesthetically pleasing buildings typically, or facilities that are in a residential, that could be in a residential neighborhood. But 60 days could be fine. We could also allow for one-time administrative extension based on circumstances as well. Those are all feasible.
Sorry, I was just thinking of them coming back repeatedly at, like, 30 days just doesn't seem long when you start talking about renovation, so I was just trying to cut down on coming back to administration for extensions. Like if you had a 60 or 90 day one in the first place, but that's up to, in my opinion, the administration, because they're the ones coming back and taking up your time, so.
Chief Cody?
So that 60 days, 90 days both would be fine. I think probably 60 days actually might give a little bit more flexibility on our end, so that would be no problem. I just wanted to correct that earlier I had referred to that zone, the transitional, commercial transitional zoning as C3, as C4, and it is actually C3 is the transitional commercial district, so I just the wrong term there.
So certainly we have to come up with some sort of balance in that time period, and I don't, there are a lot of residents who do not appreciate the CCANs and site trailers, that type of thing, but they are a necessary part of a construction project, so perhaps we can come up with some sort of a balance here. It's been suggested that perhaps 60 days and then authorization after that to some sort of a maximum. I think that we need to have a drop dead maximum time frame, but I don't think that there's going to be too many projects that get completed in 30 days. So that was just my kind of useless. Director Thompson?
So if council's amenable, then we will include a revision in second reading for a 60-day period with a 30-day administrative extension, and that would be a total upset of 90 days, and we can bring that forward at second reading.
Thank you. Councillor Jacobson, you're involved in this world. Would the 90 days be a reasonable time frame for that type of use?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Do we need a motion for that adjustment or no? Is everybody in line with that? Oh, there's one red light in this. Councillor Jacobson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm just reading this. Does it not say 30 days after the expiry of the development permit? Is that not how it's written?
So the intent would be you're only eligible to pull the permit after you issued a development permit. So it wouldn't be the time necessarily you start a development permit, you pull a permit, then that's the clock on the temporary storage facility. There would be a separate timeline for that temporary storage facility that you'd only be eligible for if you have a development permit. Is that?
So if we can have an indication of that slight adjustment, are we good with that? Okay. Okay with that then, Director Thompson? So although we have given indications for changes in this, we should, to make it official, we still need to accept the report. So if I could have someone move accordingly, I would appreciate it. Councillor Clark?
So moved.
Very good. Other lights, all those in favor? Thank you. Director Thompson, you've got a few in a row here, so the second one up is bylaw 400.28, the Trinity Crossing Phase 2, up for first reading, please.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I'm actually going to pass this off to Craig Teal, Parkland Trinity Planning Services, to report to council.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. So this bylaw is to look at Phase 2 of Trinity Crossing and the extension of residential area up both sides of the Collector Road, Trinity Street, extending through Levon's property up to the north boundary of the college property. As you can see on the air photo with the pink outline around the area in question. That area is designated or proposed to change from FD, reserved for future development, to R1. In the outline plan, there's a little bit of a discrepancy. The outline plan was done prior to the current land use bylaw, and it still labels it as R1C area, but that district that used to exist under bylaw 300 was collapsed into the R1 district under bylaw, land use bylaw 400. The proposal is consistent with the council's approved outline plan for the Trinity Crossing area, consistent with the North Area Structure Plan, and consistent with municipal development plan. Administration is recommending that it move ahead for public hearing and recommend the first reading for bylaw 400.28, and the second motion that council schedule a public hearing for the bylaw at 5:30 p.m. on Monday, March 9th, 2020.
Appreciate that, Senator Teal. Kind of an unusual shaped zone there, so the extensions on either side on the road line in pink, are those, that's utility corridor or roadway, or what is the proposed use of those areas?
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. So the application covers two parcels. One is the bulk of the land that Levon owns for Trinity Crossing, and then they also acquired a 6-meter strip of enclosed portion of road, which is the kind of the big T running east-west that you see on that drawing. The proposal is to create that as part of a lane in both the outline plan and the pending subdivision application.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions or concerns they'd like to bring forward? Councillor Jacobson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council give first reading to bylaw 400.28 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Ross.
Sorry, Mayor Creasy, just a question to possibly CAO Gowdy. The land to the west of the airstrip, is that the college or is that the airport? So then that north of the pink line going east to west, that could be used for access to that land between the airstrip and Levon?
Yes, I think once that lane is developed, it would be continuous. It doesn't actually look like it there. There was an outline plan adopted for that piece of land at one time for an air park, and the access all came from the southwest corner, sort of an extension of that stub we see off Terrace Heights Drive.
Right.
There wasn't any proposed secondary access on the northwest. However, it obviously wasn't subdivided or zoned that way, so a new design could be made. I don't think this considers the former outline plan.
So if that land was developed to the airport, that area we're speaking of, would then offset levies pertain to that road for access to the property to the east of the end of that future possible road?
So it wouldn't be covered by offsite levies. That land would be subject to some offsite levies, but there's no arterial roads that are identified in the offsite levy bylaw for funds to go towards. If that
Yeah,
is,
I can't. Because one of my community responsibilities, I can't elaborate more on. Anyways, it was just curiosity, so my apologies for bringing that up.
So in essence, those offsite levies do not cover internal roadways. Those are for collector roads and other infrastructure.
Okay.
is maybe Director Thompson or Planner Teal, is there a plan where this, the lane on the north end of this parcel would be contiguous with the development of that parcel that used to be known as the Air Park parcel, if you know where that is?
So I am just bringing up the outline plan now, so I'll be able to tell you in 1 second.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs has properly directed me to page 4. Ross, if you could scroll down there, it does show a continuation of 72nd Avenue connecting in, there you are. And so that would likely provide your secondary access in addition to that southwest
Okay.
component. Thank you.
Sorry, I kind of just opened up a different discussion.
Director Thompson, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, on there, yeah, that's from our GIS mapping, it's showing a closed road that from 76th Avenue East, that portion of roadway has been closed and is owned by the Levy and the college jointly, so it's no longer a actual through road. The north part of that parcel abuts the East Ready outline plan, which is currently an active outline plan, and that closed road will be developed for essentially a joint lane that will service Levy's development, as well as the residential development on the north, in that north parcel. And so that shows a lane that continues through, but it wouldn't be a full road as suggested by the width of that line on this map. And so, just to clarify that.
Appreciate that. So Councillor Gullis, I believe you made the motion then to bring forward Trinity Crossing Phase 2 for first reading. And I see we have nothing additional, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? I'm going to call that unanimous.
I'm sorry.
And the next item up, pardon me? Thank you for reminding me of that as well, that because this is for first reading, we're going to need a public hearing motion as well. So we care to make that. Councillor Connick?
So move that council schedule a public hearing for bylaw 400.28 at 5:30 p.m. on Monday, March 9th, 2020.
Thank you. All those in favor? None opposed? Thank you. And Director Thompson, we have the Parkland Community Planning Services Bylaw 475 for second reading. Thank you.
So before council is administration's recommendation to give second and third reading to bylaw 475. This bylaw allows the city of Lacombe to be a part of the Parkland Community Planning Services. Parkland Community Planning Services, often short to PCPS, is a not-for-profit planning agency that provides services throughout central Alberta to currently 14 members in the area. And passage of this bylaw will allow administration or the city to access lower rates with Parkland Community Planning Services. It also gives the city a seat on their governing board. And so tonight we're recommending council pass second and third reading for this bylaw, as well as an appoint a person to sit on that board. And administration is recommending the Director of Operations and Planning be council's appointee for that. We are further recommending that council direct administration enter into a 3-year agreement with Parkland Community Planning Services, which is the minimum time frame in which to enter into a long-term agreement with them. So council's any questions, certainly can answer them.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, McCreasy. I had questions, and I feel like I was going to ask at last meeting, but can you explain the representation, like the members per population? Why is there less representation for communities with greater population?
Thank you, Your Worship. To answer your question, I think you're going to the structure of how we select our board of, the actual board from the member representatives. So we have a 5-member board, and one of those is reserved for any municipality, be it a town, a city, a county that has a population greater than 6,000. 2 are what formerly called the town category, so they're also population-based. And then a third, our bylaw used to talk about summer villages and villages, and we've gone to a population threshold rather than some of our towns actually are slightly below 1,000 person limit. And so we basically try to structure it based on the size of the municipality, not necessarily the status of the municipality for spots on the board.
Councillor Jacobson?
Sure, I'm not sure who this question should be addressed to, probably the CAO. I guess I just assumed that we are doing this now as opposed to previously because these are services that we had attempted to achieve in-house prior to this.
Not just attempted, we did provide these services in-house in the past, and so with the new structure, we want to access the lower rates. You could still participate in the past, but being a member gives you access to lower rates. Just to Councillor Hoekstra's question, I think you were saying, basically, why do the smaller municipalities get more reps on the board? Was kind of the core of the question. I think that is because I would estimate that there is far more of those smaller members than there is of communities over 6,000. Is that a true statement?
If you wish to add to that, I guess I did forget the second half of your question. The board structure, it's structured to give the smaller municipalities, which are the more numerous of the group, say more than 50% of the actual number of members, 2 seats on the board. And the remaining, the larger municipalities like the town of Olds pushing 9,000, Clearwater County, if you wish, to around 13,000. Those and up start getting those remaining 3 to the 5 seats on the board. So it's a little bit skewed almost to 1,000 plus participants as opposed to 500 and 700.
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would move that council give second reading to bylaw 475.
Thank you. Anything additional before we vote? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Anybody choose to entertain the third reading this evening? Councillor Hibbs?
I'm on a roll. I will move that council give third reading to bylaw 475.
Thank you. See any additional input? All those in favor? Thank you. And so, Councillor Gullickson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I will do the third motion. I just want to clarify though, should we have a name in there or should we just have a position?
I would suggest it's kind of hard for us to appoint a position to a board, so I think it has to be a person who happens to be in that position now, so.
Okay, so what do we want? That just the whole thing as it is now and then you'll change it later, okay. All right, that council appoint Jordan Thompson, Director of Operations and Planning, to the Parkland Community Planning Services Board.
Thank you. All those in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. And then it also outlined the 3-year commitment. So accordingly, Councillor Hoekstra.
I'll move that council direct administration to enter into a 3-year planning services contract with the Parkland Community Planning Services.
Thank you. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Thank you. Planner Teal, a little job security for you for a while. Congratulations.
Thank you, Your Worship, and if I may, on behalf of the other members and the board, welcome to the family.
Appreciate that. We look forward to continuing He's supplying the services that we need. Thank you. Director Thompson, you've had a request to waive some fees. You care to go through that item, please?
Yes, we have. So we received a letter from Stephen Schultz on behalf of the Lacombe Composite High School requesting the costs associated with the development and building permit fees related to the school's latest EcoVision project, Roof for Kids. The request is for those fees to be waived. And the letter is included in the administration's report for council information. And so administration has looked at the value of the request. It totals approximately $750 to $1,400, depending on the value of the secondary permits primarily, meaning gas and electrical permits are calculated on a per fixture basis, and plumbing and on a per, it depends on the development. And so we estimate it to be about $750 to $1,400 to be the value of this waiver. In addition, we take a deposit at the time of development. That's to ensure or help incentivize compliance with the development permit conditions. Mr. Schultz has already paid the development permit fee associated with the Roofs for Kids project, which is essentially the redevelopment of one CCAN initially into a goat farm, which will have a green roof that will form part of the suite of projects that the EcoVision program offers to students of Lacombe High School. And the request is, so certainly the Stephen Schultz has already paid the development permit fee, and the permit is subject to appeal until February 12th. So when you look at the history of the permits, certainly the EcoVision program has been a development over a number of years, and it's an award-winning program. When we look at the development of the greenhouse, and we look at whether the city has set precedent in this area and waived the fees in the past, and at this point we can confirm that the fees were not waived in the past. We also look at the impact on the budget if these fees are waived now. It's something that it's, I guess, a little too early to tell in terms of where the city will land over or under budget on fee revenue at the end of the year. But certainly over the last number of years, we've come both over and under in terms of our projected fee revenue. So we're unable to really give council any guidance or an indication of whether at the end of this year we'll land there. Certainly we probably won't be right on it. So the EcoVision program, as I said, it's an award-winning program, has attracted a number of major corporate sponsors. They have a list of corporate sponsors on their website, and certainly developments of this nature do require ongoing support, and the permit fees that come apart that are included in these developments are only a fraction of what the ongoing costs of those programs are. And so for these reasons, administration's recommendation to council is to not waive the associated permit fees for this particular development.
Thank you. Councillor Jacobson, go ahead.
Sure. I'll speak in favor of the words that manager, or probably not manager, Director Thompson shared. On the ECHO board, this particular group has already received a very substantial, it's public information, so north of $20,000 commitment to do this project, in addition to substantial funds that have been matched. And it's not that I'm not in favor of this very unique program, it's just that in our budget, we approve various programs for funding to be applied for by groups like the Community Builder Program or what have you. And I think to approve potentially donation in kind through the mechanism of waiving development fees is not only unprecedented, but again, it just kind of muddies the water of how these things should be applied for and applied to the programs. So while, again, I definitely applaud the merits of this program, I don't support this request because I think it falls outside the proper scope of how these things should be applied for. So I will make the motion that council apply, or direct administration to apply standard fees to the Roofs for Kids development.
Thanks, Councillor. I appreciate your comments, and I too would suggest that we not confuse the sincerity of the program or the success of this program with the fact that these fees and whatnot are in place for a reason and need to be implemented universally. So thank you for that. Anyone else? We do have a motion before us. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? No, that's unanimous. Thank you. And Director Thompson, the final one there under request for decision 5.7, the C&E Trail upgrade offsite levy expenditure. Could you walk us through that item, please?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Creasy. Administration is seeking council's authorization to spend up to $50,000 to bury an overhead power line adjacent to C&E Trail, funded from the offset levy reserve. We've been in discussions with, actually at the request of Caris Village, the Caris Village Development Group. They've approached us and are looking to partner with the city of Lacombe on a power upgrade that's required to not only service the Caris Village building, but also to relocate and bury that line so that essentially it's out of the development, out of the way for the future development of C&E Trail. And so they've identified they need to have a power upgrade for that area to support the more intense needs of this Caris Village building. It's a single-phase power line there now. They need 3-phase power. They have looked at the cost to upgrade power from single-phase to 3-phase, and the city of, and that's what they funded their project based on. The city of Lacombe, because of the future needs, has indicated that the burying of that power line would be required, or at the very least the relocation of that line would be required for the future upgrade of C&E Trail. And so we worked with them to develop they're working with Fortis rather to develop a quote, but they've indicated that the difference between what they would normally have to pay to upgrade the power in place versus to burying the power in a different location is about a $50,000 difference, and that's an upset that they've identified. And so we would like council's authorization to continue to work with them to refine that quote and then ultimately support this work. We can see if they were to upgrade the power in place and leave the poles in the current alignment where they are, when the city goes forward and upgrades C&E Trail in the future, 100% of those costs would be borne by the city in the future, rather than only a portion of them today when partnering with the Caris Village Group. And so this is something that will save the city money in the future. It also allows the location of this power line to be in its final alignment today rather than later. Administration supports this, and but certainly we're going to answer any questions of council.
Thanks, Director Thompson. Before we take other questions, I just want some clarification. I was just a little unclear as to the replacement of you've got clearly labeled in that drawing there, the existing overhead power. So will it be buried right back to the water reservoir or further, or where all is this taking place for this change?
So up to the water reservoir, there's already 3-phase power. And so I can't remember where the exact pole is, but I believe the pole is south of the entrance to the water reservoir. From that point north, where it has to be upgraded. But it really depends on Fortis' quote, because if Fortis determines that it makes the most sense to take it back a little bit further to the intersection, that may be what happens too. But ultimately, all those poles would be at least from the reservoir north to the north end of the red line on the screen, will be buried on a new alignment away from the C&E Trail road lines.
So that will be the minimum distance. So it could be more.
It could be more,
Okay.
and that's,
Fair enough.
yeah.
Fair enough, thank you. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm just going to make the motion that council authorizes administration to spend up to $50,000 to bury the overhead power line adjacent CD trail as described, funded from the offset levy reserve.
Thank you. Councillor Conick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. So do the homeowners on Harris Road draw from the existing power lines today? Or how does that work?
So the homeowners throughout the Henders, they are serviced through a power line within the development. And so there'd be power within an easement on the front of all of their lots. And this power is, I believe it's looped around on that south side and this side of that development that all services that area. And so the bearing of this power would not impact the services to them at all. It would just become part of an upgraded forest network.
Okay, no, that's what I wanted to just find out if that would be any impact to them and any cost to them, but no, this is just, okay, thank you.
Anyone else? If not, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous? In favor? I believe that's all the requests for decision that we have. And we'll move into the information section 6 and start out with our Chief Administrative Officer report. If you would bring that one up on the screen, please. Chief Gowdy, if you'd care to go through it. On screen.
Don't we, all right. Sorry.
Councillor Conick, go ahead.
Mayor Creasy, under 2.3, you have reordering item 7 prior to item 6. So do we do the minutes prior to this, or?
We did, but we didn't go through that, so I think that we'll continue on with the administrative report, but thank you.
So just a couple of highlights from the significant events report. The mayor and I did attend the President's Summit on Municipal Finance late in January there. There was kind of good items coming out of there, some good ideas. We do have some RFPs out right now for both property assessment services and our records electronic management initiative. So that ties in with our retention schedule bylaw, which you've passed first reading of this evening. We have received the solid waste review. It's a little bit slower than we had wanted, of course, because we're going back and forth, but I know that more than one councillor are eagerly awaiting it, and so are we. So Director Thompson and I are going to be finalizing that over the next couple of weeks with the consultant and bringing it to future council meeting. And then administratively, we are working on the business planning for the next 3-year cycle, and that's kind of the high level of what's happening within the administrative offices. Oh, and the ICFs, but of course that's later this evening.
Thank you, Chief Gowdy. I guess just to comment on the Municipal Finance Summit that we attended in Edmonton, there was quite a number of creative ideas as far as relating to financing for municipality. And I wanted everybody to know that I do not believe that there was any there that Lacombe is not practicing now. So in as much as it was, I guess, unfortunate that I didn't gain a lot of insight into new ways that we could stretch our tax dollars and garner more funds in various ways, to know that we, in fact, I would suggest, are a little ahead of the curve, and using all of them, I think, was very good news. So that's not to discourage Manager Reyes from continuing on that same path, but I think that we are in a pretty enviable spot in that regard. So just wanted to bring that up. Councillor Conick?
I think, Mayor Christie, you don't allude to it in here, but I'm just going to ask anyways. The issue with the water main on 2A and 12, they dug a hole and now they've dug a different hole. Have they got a handle on that, or?
depends what you consider a handle on it, I guess as a, just to go through it a little bit. So when it was extreme cold some time ago, a couple months now, there was we noticed a small trickle leak show up at that intersection. So we waited until it was suitable to dig. When they went to dig, they actually heard rushing water in one of the catch basins. So they figured, okay, we got a leak over there, and it's showing up in this catch basin, so we'll repair the leak. Again. So we looked at it, and it actually is a fairly big job for our crew, one of the bigger that they've attempted in terms of traffic accommodation, that sort of thing. So we talked a lot about whether we would do that in-house or go out for contracted services, and ultimately decided to try to tackle it in-house. They went and investigated that first leak, so they started at the catch basin and sort of they look for if they can find where the leak is coming from. They found it, they dug down, did a repair, come back the next day to fill the top dressing on that repair, and noticed that actually one of the valves they had operated to isolate the water to do the repair was now leaking. It's very old infrastructure, cast iron pipe in the area, and so with the operation of that valve, they'd actually broke the valve, or it was just waiting to fail. So then they came back and said, okay, we'll cut that valve out, we'll put a new valve in. So they did that successfully. Came back, and that was on Saturday. So they came back on Friday. That was on Saturday. They came back to again fill in the top dressing and prepare it for a temporary surface. And actually, I stopped by to encourage them, and they said actually we have another leak down in the alley. So we went down, and they have isolated there's another break in the alley. They repaired that. That repair is successfully holding. Unfortunately, at all of these repairs, there was the hope that the original leak that is on the east side of 2A would stop leaking with these multiple repairs, and it hasn't. It has continued. So I'm very confident in the abilities and decision-making of our crew, and so yes, from that sense, we have a handle on it. We're not up against anything that we're not prepared to address. But no, we don't have a handle on it, as in, we actually don't know where this current leak is, and we're going to start investigating that Wednesday.
I guess to add to that, in defense of our own crews, I am thankful that they did choose to take it upon themselves to do this leak as opposed to a contractor. Indeed, it has been troublesome. It's not any more so than if it had been an outside contractor. I just want to reiterate what Chief Gowdy said. We're dealing with extremely old or aged infrastructure in the neighborhood of 80 years. And given, as such, the drawings that refer to it are leave a little bit to be desired as to locations and types of fittings and whatnot that are involved. So there's a fair bit to it. I'm thankful that they're on it, and it looks like we are in for some additional decisions to be made as to what route is going to happen with the remaining leaks there. But I want the community to understand that administration is on top of this item. It's at a very visible location in Lacombe, so it's not one that we can just forget about and hide. And it is being addressed, and hopefully it's sooner than later, and will be accomplished with a minimal amount of disruption to traffic flow in the area. So be patient. I'm sure that it will improve in the not too distant future. But thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Connick. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I was just wanting to ask the CAO, what is the response that you're going to make to Old Creek Public Schools to their presentation? I don't know if we discussed that.
So they, in their presentation, and I received their presentation materials after, have a list of requests, questions, opportunities for further collaboration potentially. And so we're taking a look at that and preparing some responses. there may be in those responses the need for, we might say, sounds like a great idea, we would need further council input or something like that. But as of right now, we're approaching it sort of a similar way to what we would do with Coffee with Council, to just make sure that every one of the requests is addressed, and there probably will be a need for further consultation with them in the future.
So what's everybody's preference? Want to continue on with the additional information, or would you prefer to go down to our minutes? Carry on, that's kind of where I'm at, suits me fine. Next item up was 6.2 Council Mailbox. We've got some correspondence from Alberta Health Services in the review from February 3rd. Was there any questions or concerns with this item? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the Big Brothers Big Sisters thank you letter to council as a whole, received on February 4th. It looks like the crew in plaid there has come up with a nice Christmas message, and always a pleasure to hear from them and recognize the important work that they do for mentoring youth in our community. So I'll thank them now for that. It's appreciated. Committee reports and minutes. We've got one submission, 638 from the Municipal Library Board from November 26. Councillor Jacobson, is there any items there you'd care to highlight? Very good. Any questions on it? Perhaps you would care to go through your councillor's report. Councillor Jacobson then.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Had a municipal planning commission meeting on January 22nd. We had one item on the agenda. It was the CCAN at the high school, actually. It was an interesting presentation by the students, and that item was approved by MBC to be installed for their program. Library board meeting on the 28th. I did attend the meeting, but was asked, and I decided to leave due to an illness that I had, and didn't want to infect anybody, so I decided not to stay. And then I went to the interagency meeting hosted by FCSS. That was a luncheon. I found it fascinating that all the different services that are available in Central Alberta, from seniors' taxes to boxing for people with Parkinson's. It's incredible what's available, and I think these meetings are very informative and give you an idea of what our social services are doing for us in our communities. Sometimes I think we do take them for granted. So I felt it was very good. So I did enjoy that. And that was my report.
We appreciate you attending that meeting on our behalf. Thank you. Next up, Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So yeah, I had two events in the last couple weeks. The Rikabetsu Friendship Society met, and it was their annual general meeting. And as I indicated in there, they're really seeking direction from the city as to what the future of the efforts of this society should be. And I will be talking to CAO Gaudi about a notice of motion regarding that in order to get that activated. And then the chamber met, and we'll be discussing some of that later.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Jacobson, I understand you had a report. It was just after the submission timeframe, so if you'd care to go through it.
Sure. Just the key points are there. Just some notes on my attendance of the two committees I'm involved in that I missed because I wasn't here at the last meeting due to illness. Probably the one that was most interesting that I'll probably just share a little bit of information with you guys I was reached out to by an individual from Better Workplace wanting to meet with me about an opportunity for the city. And I'm sure, like all of you, get these emails all the time, and they're mostly spam. So I forwarded on to the mayor to see if anybody else received this, and this is legit need. And so go sit down and see what it's all about. And it was actually an extremely interesting meeting. And I was probably the wrong person for this gentleman to sit down. Probably should have sat down with Guy. But without letting all the cats out of the bag at this point, because I don't know how much I can share from what he told me, they are in the process of finalizing a deal with two, and one specifically large employer in town here, to create a consulting agreement whereby the employer will use their essentially systems to allow their employees to stay home from work. So they work 1 or 2 days from home, come into the office. Pardon me, two or three days a week at home, 1 or 2 days at the office. And this is something that they instituted successfully down in the States in several cities and also in Calgary. And the reason they've chosen Lacombe is, I guess, through their collaboration with government agencies at different levels. This is the institution that they got directed to that would be most significant. So because of that, there's actually an interesting opportunity for the city to piggyback with them, because in concert with setting this agreement in place, if this happens, they want to also then market Lacombe. They want to have a pilot project where Lacombe will be their, what do they call it? I forget their exact name for it, but basically they call it their ideal work from home city or community for Alberta. And there's actually an FCM grant that's available specifically for this kind of thing that they want the city to help them navigate to apply for. But if they're successful with both creating this joint venture with these employers in town here and this, we get a whole bunch of free marketing for people to come and live in Lacombe here for this. And they will then be taking this and talking to like major employers, like they typically target anybody over 25. So big companies like, well, I guess it's used to be in Canada or Ovintiv or Epcor, any of these large places where there's lots of office workers who are perfect for this kind of work from home scenario. And when they're creating these when they're creating these employments or consulting agreements with these companies, they'll say, by the way, we have this program set up in the city of Lacombe. It ticks off all these check marks for being an ideal like work from home commute type scenario. We have this grant in place with FCM. Let your employees know. So essentially, it's a zero cost initiative from the city's end of it. What they want from the city, if indeed they do get this joint venture agreement in place with a major employer in town here, if they get it in place, they just want the city's help to navigate the FCM application, which is substantial, and it genuinely ticks all the boxes. This pilot program ticks all the boxes for for what it's looking for. So it was extremely interesting, and certainly a very innovative way of potentially adding a new pipeline of people who would be very interested in coming to live in Lacombe, if it ticks those boxes. So I was pretty excited at the end of the hour, to be honest with you. So if anything more comes of it, I'll let you all know. And I've handed this off to Guy anyway, so it'll probably come to that angle. But regardless, I thought I'd bring you up to speed on what that meeting was about.
Appreciate that, thank you. Councillor Ross, did you have a verbal report, or no?
I think Mayor Creasy, I just had the one meeting with the Regional Fire Services meeting. Just some updates with it. There's some purchase of equipment. Lacombe and Black Falls is not signed the agreement. I guess there's still more discussions between the city. I don't think Black Falls intends on signing off. They've done their own, if that's correct. And Lacombe is still in collaboration with Drayton and so forth with some issues. I guess one disappointment is as CN being a community partner, we've expressed interest and supported Director Pichet. I brought up that could we, as the 6 communities collaboratively go together to emphasize some concerns to CP, and it was kind of deflating to hear no support. Apparently that's an ongoing issue to try to have results in Mr. CP pertaining to, for example, our fire hazard on the east side of our fence that Director Pichet and the city administration has some ongoing efforts just to get access. It's disappointing that they're not good community partners in that sense. I emphasize I don't agree with the number of fire departments of the grass fires in the spring, that they could collectively have a better action plan to relieve our fire services from the scene by using more private contractors, and that was kind of basically deflected that CP's been that way for 20, 25 years and they ain't gonna change. So it's kind of a little discouraging that when you have 6 departments in 6 different communities, that maybe we could have taken that opportunity to express concerns more collaboratively, but that didn't happen. And from what I understand, our administration has obviously already emphasized some concerns. So yeah, just disappointed that. But they have some ongoing projects still, with a project out of Paraguay, I think it is, and more equipment continually going to them communities. So I applaud them for their efforts, and yeah, good meeting all around. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs? Anything? No, thank you. Councillor Connick? We're all good? So those information items then that we have so far, perhaps we could accept those separately prior to minutes. Then motion to address those. Councillor Hoekstra?
So what are we, the reports and mailbox as information? I move that we accept them as information.
All information items, very good. All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Next up is our minutes from the January 27th regular meeting of council. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those minutes? If there's any items of concern need to be revised, please bring them forward. Councillor Hoekstra?
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you. I don't see a lot of other lights going on, so apparently nobody had any notes that could have suggested there's anything incorrect with them. So all those in favor of accepting those, yes, thank you. So the next item up under notices of motion generated from Councillor Jacobson. If you would care to take us through item 8.1, please.
Sure, I'm happy to do so. It was my understanding that it was notice given now when we discuss it next time, but that's fine. I'm happy to give you a background there.
I would like for you just to at least read it in so it's on public record.
Oh, sure, sorry. That council direct administration to research and present options for instituting a redevelopment levy in strategic areas of the city.
Very good. Nothing additional you'd like to add?
Sure, yeah. So very simply, one of the biggest challenges that as a developer you deal with when you're trying to do infill development in the city is, of course, community opposition to your project. And a lot of the opposition is actually quite well founded, and especially as it relates to the overall upgrades to the neighborhood that are going to be required based on the development you're proposing. So for example, if there's a lane that needs to be paved or infrastructure that needs to be upgraded, so on and so forth. And as a developer, while it is, you can understand the perspective of the citizens who are putting those things forward. It's very unrealistic to expect that you're going to be responsible for taking responsibility for the entire neighborhood. Conversely, the neighborhood's concerns are valid. So I've always thought that an offsite levy system, or what I call a redevelopment levy system, would be very beneficial in certain areas of the city that are really prime for redevelopment, wherein the city would take the overall lead in laying out an overall redevelopment plan, determining what it's going to cost to upgrade the lanes, upgrade the infrastructure down the road, and determine a cost for all that, and put a price per lot for the neighborhood that would cover that. And then, of course, over time, as that lot sells or is redeveloped, you know, the developer or owner is going to pay that as they redevelop. And then, of course, and then once the amounts were at appropriate level, that whoever was in council at the time determined that we're going to trigger those upgrades. All those upgrades have now been paid for by the actual people who are end up purchasing those upgraded units, right? Which is how it should be in the first place. There is an absolute vision to how it's all done. It's not done piecemeal with maybe one project that can afford to do some substantial upgrades and looks great, and another project that has really sort of gone to the opposite end and it not looks really good. And then conversely, that message can be conveyed to the citizens who are there with concerns about this at the MPC meetings, and they can be assured that, you know, this is the plan that's in place for the redevelopment of your neighborhood. We can't give you a guarantee as to the timeline because it's really going to be a function of how fast this happens. However, this is ultimately going to be paid for by the people who are going to be buying these new units in your neighborhood, and it's going to be done to a uniform and appropriate standard. And not only would that give clarity to the citizens who live in these affected neighborhoods, it also gives clarity to the developers too, that this is, you can expect these costs, you know, when you're coming in to do your development application. And I think overall, especially as these program, or as this development, if it were to be approved, levy program gain traction, it would actually promote development because you would have very nice looking neighborhoods in a consistent redevelopment fashion. So I was planning on speaking to this in much more detail next meeting, but that is the genuine thrust behind my motion here.
Thank you very much for bringing that forward. No, I think that given the nature of it, it's not something that necessarily everyone has a great handle on exactly what you had in mind, so I wanted to have you to have the opportunity to give us a brief outline, and I appreciate that. I think it's noteworthy that a developer initiated this type of a thing, so I look forward to seeing what's brought forward. So, so normally we have a short recess prior to our in-camera discussions and provide an opportunity to talk with the press. Mr. Vaughn is here by himself, so right now it is 6:26. I've got on my clock here, so how about if we say 6:45, we will reconvene. And we'll recess until then. Thank you. Is there chocolate to bit? Well, we have a break here.